Imagine being able to hear from a friend or loved one who has died. What might they tell you about their existence in the afterlife? What advice would they give you about your own life? Believers say that speaking with the dead is possible, that the only thing holding all of us back is our own fear. All of these people are lined up inside this convention hall for one reason. They're here because this man, James von Prague, claims he can receive, interpret, and pass along messages from their dead relatives and friends.
And if you think the room was crowded this way and this way, you just see what I see all around me over here and here. Freebies, drop-ins.
Each of the living has paid a $40 entrance fee and comes with the same hope, that they will be one of the few chosen by von Prague to speak with a friend or relative who has passed away.
I'm seeing string with me, string, a long thing of string. And I believe that something belonged to someone and it's tied on this string. And I thought it was someone's son. Does that make sense to someone with this string?
My grandson was born.
This woman says the string von Prague claims to see is hers. It was part of a sculpture that belonged to her son, who was killed in a motorcycle accident.
Was he a musician at all?
Yes, he did. He played the baritone sax.
Okay, because I keep on seeing musician with him. I'm seeing him writing music, okay? And I want to tell you that he wanted to write music here, but he never did, or he couldn't do it.
Right.
But he wanted to. Okay, God bless you. I'm going to move on. Thank you.
Sometimes von Prague doesn't get it right.
Your mother's funny. She's laughing. She has a great sense of humor. I mean, a great sense of humor. She's telling me about a new wallet or a new billfold. Telling me about a new billfold or wallet, and it's a Snap one. And this is what she's showing me. Well, keep it. I don't know what it means. And where's Daddy? Daddy's passed over too, has he?
No.
I bring you whatever I receive. Names, details, whoever comes through. Perhaps you want to talk to your father who passed away. Your father might not show up. It might be someone else who shows up. Or maybe no one will show up. Each person is different. I can never guarantee that there'll be results, because that's not how it works.
Thank you very much.
For von Prague, it has worked for more than a decade. He's a best-selling author and a self-proclaimed international expert on life after death. He says that his ability to talk to spirits manifested itself long ago. James von Prague was born in 1959 to a middle-class family in Queens, New York. His father worked as a carpenter in the theater and instilled in his son a love of performing. A childhood friend remembers young James as unusual.
James had a sensitivity and a particular perception of things that went a little bit beyond where most people were at.
Scott Leaf remembers an early incident where he was convinced that James had a special gift. One autumn evening in 1971, the 12-year-olds went to Leaf's basement, where they wanted to conduct a seance, hoping to contact the spirit of rock singer Janis Joplin, who had died 1 year earlier of a drug overdose.
During that seance, we had a candle lit in the middle of the room. In the middle of the table. And during that seance, I'm pretty sure it was James who asked to see a sign if Janis Joplin was there. And it wasn't more than 10 seconds later that all of a sudden, in a closed room with all the windows shut, some gust of wind came along and blew the candle out.
After that early incident, von Prague claims he forgot about his abilities and made no further attempts to speak to the dead. James graduated from high school in 1977, then packed up and went to college in San Francisco. He later moved to Hollywood, hoping to become a television comedy writer, but could not find work. Frustrated, he got a job as a contracts administrator for Paramount Pictures. Then, a friend told him about a spiritual medium she had been seeing in West Hollywood.
And I said, what is a medium? And she said, he's someone that contacts people that pass over. And I told her I don't believe in any of that sort of thing. And I didn't. I was very pragmatic.
The friend convinced Van Praagh to go with her to a session. When James arrived, the medium had a message for him.
He looked at me and he said, "There are lights all around you, James. And within 2 to 3 years, you yourself will be able to communicate with the other side." Which I did not believe, and I thought this guy is crazy.
Crazy or not, Van Praagh says he waited for a sign from the spiritual world, but it never came. The psychic's prophetic message gnawed at him for months. Van Praagh then went back to the psychic and asked for advice on how to develop the ability that he believed he possessed. The psychic answered by enrolling him in nearly a dozen meditation classes, designed to draw out Van Praagh's supposed ability. A few months later, he gave up his job at Paramount to pursue being a medium full-time. He began conducting readings, charging $40 a session, in his one-bedroom apartment. He soon built a list of regular clients and sometimes offered his services to local charities. In May 1992, James agreed to conduct a charity event. In the audience that evening was a man who would ultimately credit James with pulling him from the brink of suicide.
I experienced a loss that I, at the time, thought I could never get over. And I really didn't see much of a future for myself.
Peter Redgrove, a successful businessman, had recently lost his longtime companion, Norris Hansen.
The best way to describe Norrie was sunshine. If you think of a big sunflower, that was Norrie. When he walked into a room, he lit up a room. He was innately and fundamentally a good person.
Peter and Norris had lived together for nearly 10 years when Norris was diagnosed with the AIDS virus. He died in 1990.
I was gripped with the grief and that great sense of loss, and I just wanted to hold on, and so much thought was directed to him and wishing that he were still here.
A year and a half later, a close friend dragged him to the event where Van Praagh was giving readings. Impressed with the medium's seeming accuracy, Peter made an appointment to meet with the psychic. As the day of the meeting drew near, Peter was filled with questions. Would this man free him from the grief that had paralyzed him? Would he truly be able to contact Norrie? When the day of his appointment arrived, Peter was so nervous he could barely drive to the session.
I didn't quite know what to expect. And yet, at the same time, I felt that this experience would, in many ways, change my life.
When he arrived, Van Praagh told Peter that the spirit of a man had been waiting to talk to him all morning.
I said, "There's a man here by the name of," and I said, "It's a very strange name. It's a very odd name. His name is Norris."
Peter claims he never told James anything about his companion, had never given him a name. Then Van Praagh said something else that proved to Peter that he was no fraud and had indeed contacted his partner of 18 years.
He paused and chuckled. And he said, "Your friend's really funny. He's correcting me. It's Norrie." And of course, Norrie was the name that we had together. It was always Norrie. It was never Norris. And I knew in that instance that this was real. James said, "Your friend is showing me your home, and it's beautiful. It's gorgeous," and it was. I lived in a wonderful place. And James said, "Your friend is showing me a photograph in a very ornate frame. That's his favorite picture of himself."
The anguish and despair that had absorbed Peter's life since Norrie's death seemed to disappear during the one-hour session with Van Praagh.
As all of this was happening and the reading was continuing, there was a lightness that was entering me. And it was almost as though a door was being opened, and what I saw beyond that door was light.
As the meeting ended, Van Praagh made the intriguing announcement that there were others from the spirit world who wished to talk to him. Peter agreed to come back for another appointment. What he would find out then would shock him more than his first reunion with Norrie. Next, James Van Praagh introduces Peter Redgrove to a mysterious family member he never knew existed. In August 1992, spiritual medium James Van Praagh told Los Angeles businessman Peter Redgrove that he had contacted the spirit of his longtime companion, who had died almost 2 years earlier. A few months later, Redgrove went back to Van Praagh, hoping to hear from others who had passed away. This time, as Van Praagh meditated, he said he made a connection with a young man named Robert, who claimed to be a relative of Peter's.
James responded with, "He is telling me he is of your blood and sends you much love." And that made no sense to me. So the next day, I called my aunt in England and I asked her a simple question: who is Robert? And there were a few seconds of silence. And her response to me was, "How did you find out?"
His aunt revealed that Robert was the name given to an older brother of his who died of pneumonia at 6 months old. Peter had never been told about him. An incredulous Peter asked Van Praagh for an explanation.
It's been my experience that the baby that dies will grow up in the spirit world, and they will go to a prime of their life. And the parents, when they pass over, will meet them again.
There was one more person to be revealed in that November reading.
James looked at me. He said, "This doesn't make a whole lot of sense. There's a nun here." And he proceeded to describe her. And the instant he said there was a nun, I knew exactly who it was.
When Peter was 6 years old, his mother, a single parent living in poverty, had given him up for adoption. Peter was then sent to live in a Catholic orphanage in Southend-on-Sea, England. He remembers the orphanage as a cold, cruel place. He had grim memories of one nun in particular, named Sister Eugene.
She seemed to single me out and was amazingly abusive. My hands and knuckles were sometimes raw from being beaten. James said to me, "She is telling me she needs your forgiveness, and that part of what she can do now is to take care of you to make up for what she did."
The nun's message signaled a form of closure for Peter. Now that he had made the connection to Norrie and others who had died, his life regained a sense of purpose.
It has freed me and allowed me to move on. With life, I have to be involved, as we all do, with life.
I know with Peter Redgrove, I gave him a strong sense of spirituality, an awareness, if you will, that he might not have had before.
Hi, how are you? Okay.
James Van Praagh no longer performs private readings. Instead, he focuses on his national lecture tours and his best-selling books.
Once you realize there is no death, you can begin to live life in a more constructive way and help other people. And that's what it's all about. And that's the reason I do this, because it helps so many people, and I see how it changes their lives.
Can a medium like James Van Praagh receive and interpret messages from people who have died? Some scientists believe that the techniques used by Van Praagh have more to do with his background than any type of psychic ability.
In my opinion, James Van Praagh is an actor who was for a long time in search of a role to play. If you read his book, if you read the interviews with him, it's all there. He grew up in the theater. He worked for Paramount Studios. He hung around Hollywood types in hopes of finding work. He finally found work as an actor playing the role of a medium, and he's now very successful.
Psychologists like Michael Shermer contend that Van Prague's so-called psychic ability is best understood in terms of the different types of readings that anyone could perform.
Cold readings are where you literally read somebody cold. You've never seen them before, you haven't gotten information on them, and you just start throwing stuff out, lots and lots and lots of comments and questions. And the way that works is most of what you say are misses, but people will remember the hits and forget the misses, and the reason you get hits at all is through random chance.
A warm reading makes statements about people that are true for virtually everyone.
We almost all have pictures of our lost loved ones in the bedroom, next to the bed, on the hearth, over the fireplace, on the mantle where we keep these sorts of memories. So a warm reading would be to say something about that person that's true for everyone, and you're bound to get a hit, 80–90% certainty.
A hot reading is one where the medium actually digs into the client's past, retrieving seemingly otherworldly information from earthly sources.
I've had skeptics say to me that, or actually said on national television, that I actually have a computer system set up to everyone's house in the country, which I think is extraordinary. And I think I'd be the first one to tell people I had that, because I think that's incredible. I'll go around investigating people.
Information is more readily available than it's ever been in history, so it's easy to do. But in reality, I think most of the time, most psychics don't cheat like that. They don't have to. You can use these other techniques quite successfully.
Believers naturally reject such skeptical explanations and insist the skeptics are reacting to their own fear of the unknown.
Life after death makes the psychological and the medical community nervous because it's something we can't control, measure, touch, or see. And most scientists feel threatened. They feel like a loss of control when you put something underneath them that requires a little bit of belief, a little bit of faith, plus some science.
So how could one explain Van Prague's supposed discovery of the brother Peter Redgrove never knew, and the appearance of a nun who had abused him 30 years earlier?
I often hear stories about things that Van Prague gets that are just seemingly impossible, that I can't possibly explain. But whenever I see tapes of the whole reading, I have never once seen something that he got that he couldn't have gotten from, that I couldn't have gotten from the conversation and the feedback, that I can't explain through normal means, not once. So that tells me when I hear these stories, you couldn't have possibly known that there's exaggeration on the part of the storyteller. And when they go to see Van Prague, almost everybody suspends their disbelief. They suspend skepticism. They want the act to be real, and they are willing participants in that.
And now with your
Some psychologists tread the middle ground, believing Van Prague's messages from beyond the grave should be given just as much credence as the advice that any of us seek from friends and colleagues.
I think that it's not a bad idea to put that on your plate alongside what the university professors are saying, and the Nobel Prize winner is saying, and your local neighbor is saying. But don't get overly attached to the channeled entity any more than you're getting attached to your neighbor or the local professor.
Van Prague agrees and offers this advice to those who are considering a session with a medium or a psychic.
Everyone has to question things, yes, but don't be closed-minded, be open-minded. See that life continues on. There are no endings, only beginnings.
Coming up next, the Chicago accountant embarks on the journey of a lifetime as she learns to channel a 16th century Chinese prophet. This woman, Catherine Gregg, claims she is able to summon at will the spirit of a 16th century Chinese philosopher whom she calls Desi. She believes Desi travels across dimensions of space and time to speak through her, taking possession of her mind and body. She conducts weekly sessions at the home of a friend. There she dispenses advice to paying customers who believe Desi has given them a modern-day connection to a 500-year-old prophet. Catherine's supposed ability to channel is the result of a long journey that began during her childhood.
Challenge is her getting her own airtime.
Catherine was born in 1947 in Cicero, Illinois. She says her childhood was a harrowing mixture of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse at the hands of both her father and mother.
He was an alcoholic, and later on, as I got older, I realized that sort of thing doesn't happen in a vacuum, and I got to understand more of the dynamics of how much she contributed to that and how difficult a person she was, and how harsh and demanding and controlling she was towards him.
Catherine remembers her relationship with her grandmother as one of the few comforts of an unhappy family life. The older woman, however, had a strange obsession with death.
Almost every morning, she would take me with her to the local funeral parlor. No matter whether she knew the person or not, she went to the wake or to the funeral. And I think out of respect, and maybe there's my first connection with the dead, was going to funeral homes with my grandmother in the morning before I was going to school.
This early introduction to death fed into young Catherine's desire to escape her family's difficulties.
My father had a record cabinet that had a top that lifted up, and when the player was out being repaired and it was empty, I would lay in it and pretend it was a coffin because I wanted to be dead.
As a teenager, Catherine's isolation persisted. She found herself increasingly alienated from the turbulent world around her. It was 1967, a time when U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War was escalating. Reports of the daily body counts were extremely disturbing to Catherine. One spring morning, while having breakfast, she read a local paper that printed a list of servicemen and women from her hometown.
I know that I'd probably seen those lists, but I never paid attention to it. And as far as I knew, I didn't know anybody personally that was actually in the war.
There was something about this list that was strangely compelling to Catherine.
Every time I moved in the living room and every time I moved piles of paper, the same list for that day kept turning up. And as it kept happening, I was aware I'm supposed to write to somebody on this list.
A few weeks later, what seemed to be only an unusual instinct took on a distinctly vocal form. Catherine claims she heard a mysterious internal voice tell her that she needed to get started with her letter because she was running out of time. She still did not know which of the 105 servicemen she should write to, so she wrote letters to all of them. More than 80 GIs responded to Catherine's mail.
Among the things then were letters from one of the people that seemed to take the whole situation more seriously, whose letters had more depth and reflection in them. I thought he didn't belong there.
The two exchanged letters for the rest of the summer. Then on September 20th, Catherine received tragic news.
I was having breakfast in the morning and reading the paper, and an article caught my eye at the bottom of the page. It just said area serviceman killed in Vietnam. And I looked down and saw his name. And he'd been killed just a few weeks before he was due to come home. I was devastated. I reacted as if it were the worst loss in my life, and it made no sense to me. I was just hysterically crying all day long. I would get myself together enough to take the bus to work. I felt like I'd lost a family member, and it went on for weeks.
After learning of the young soldier's death, Catherine's emotions shut down. She told herself she would not allow any kind of inner voice to hurt her again. She shuffled through a series of mundane jobs, got married and divorced, and settled in Chicago working as an accountant. In 1981, Catherine began attending several personal development workshops at a local college. There she met a philosophy professor named Neil Grossman. Neil hosted channeling sessions in his home and invited Catherine to several of the programs. At each gathering, a man who claimed to channel a 19th century Asian spirit guide would speak.
So I said, I will go to this, but if I hate it, I'll get up and I'll leave. And I don't care if anybody gets mad at me, I'm going to get up and leave.
She was sort of reluctant to come, but she did, and I remember she sat very close to the door.
At one of the sessions, Catherine realized that the channeler was directing all of his comments toward her.
And then it got very quiet, and another voice spoke through him and said how we were connected, that we were connected at the soul level.
Catherine came to the frightening realization that this was the same mysterious voice she had heard years earlier, prompting her to write letters to American soldiers in Vietnam.
She said I could call her Desi for short, and that if I was experiencing times of loneliness, I could call her up, or as we might say, call her down. I said, well, how am I supposed to do that? I mean, it's not like that voice left a phone number.
Later that evening, she remarked to a friend who had also watched the session that she thought that the spirit's voice sounded flat and metallic.
And she said, oh, that's probably because she's meant to come through you, not him. And I said, are you nuts? Do you think I would do what he's doing? That's appalling.
Her friend Neil Grossman suggested she take the next step and try to allow the voice and conscience of Desi to take possession of her body. Memories of her religious childhood held her back.
It's a combination of her Catholic upbringing, which teaches that this sort of thing is the work of the devil, and our culture's teaching, which says that it's sort of nuts to be doing this. So that's sort of a hard kind of polarity to be stuck between.
When we return, the voice of Desi speaks through Catherine Gregg. That's next here on A&E.
So fine.
Chicago accountant Catherine Gregg believes she has been chosen by a 16th century Chinese prophet named Desi to be her modern-day voice and to dispense the wisdom Desi has acquired over the centuries. In 1982, Catherine learned to induce herself into something called an ecstatic trance, a state where she claims the outside world disappears into a blur and where spiritual entities take shape. In this meditative state, the form of Desi slowly began to appear in her mind's eye. During one conversation, Catherine says she pressed Desi for details of her life on Earth.
She talked about a life in southwestern China in some way. Eventually, I asked to see an image of her, and then I had 3 or 4 dreams where I saw the same figure, a small Asian woman with long black hair and this radiant smile. And I knew that it was Desi. It was very hard for me to relax and let her speak out through me. I was terrified, and so I was sort of self-conscious about it. It was very slow and intermittent. It wasn't easy at all.
Her supposed abilities eventually attracted customers. All were willing to pay for Desi's advice, usually $5 to $10 a session. One of her clients was Terry Seworth, a mother of 5 from Chicago who wanted to contact her mother-in-law, Joanne, who had died in 1987. She missed her mother-in-law terribly. After the older woman's death, Terry would get into the habit of speaking to her every day.
In the first 5 years after she passed away, every morning on my way to work, I would just, say to her, "Hi, Joanne, how you doing? I hope you're up and about, and I'm sending happy, loving thoughts your way."
Terry and her husband contacted Catherine with the hope that Desi could relay messages about the deceased woman's life in the hereafter.
I was just hoping that maybe an aspect of my mother-in-law's personality would come through, that, I would get a message or something that I knew it was her.
Hold her gently.
Terry went to her first session with Desi in April 1992. What she heard would stun her.
Desi had turned to me and said, "My mother-in-law just wanted to thank me for all my happy, loving thoughts I sent her way every day." I was like, I couldn't believe it.
Hearing Desi repeat the exact phrase she had said every day for nearly 5 years was proof enough for Terry that her mother-in-law had found a comfortable existence in the afterlife.
It's a way of keeping, her near. And I wanted to hear it from her, and I did, amazingly. I could have never imagined that I would have heard the exact words I'd said to her.
Catherine Gregg now channels Desi as a part-time business. Her clients come to get advice on everything from romance to finance.
Good evening.
Hi, Desi. Welcome back.
Thank you, Neil. Welcome to all of you.
Desi, I'm wondering what is preventing me from moving out of my current financial situation?
Lack of money. Price your time more realistically for how you value it. Look for places where you can connect. Work-wise, not just social.
Catherine says her relationship with Desi has given her a sense of purpose, and her clients say she has given them valuable advice and comfort in times of crisis. Yet she looks forward to the day when she doesn't have to channel Desi again.
The end result of the process is people connecting to their own guidance and not needing to come to Desi. So I see it as the end result is her putting herself out of business, if you will.
Can a person like Catherine Gregg find the voice of a long-dead spirit and use it to give modern-day advice? Some experts assert that Desi is an unconscious creation of Catherine's own mind.
We have to separate, first of all, authenticity from validity when it comes to these phenomena. And authenticity refers to the sincerity of the people, or whether they're really believing what they're saying when they say they're channeling.
Sociologist Marcello Truzzi also believes that the seemingly profound opinions channelers give to their clients are often little more than common sense.
Well, they're often getting generic advice that they can interpret individually. I think what's very important here is that people feel special. They feel that they are witnesses to something important. Perhaps they are searching for meaning, and this kind of metaphysics gives them a sense of meaning in their world. It's a replacement in many ways for what much religion has done for people in the past.
Catherine Gregg believes there are physiological changes that prove that she temporarily leaves her body, allowing Desi to take over her physical being.
I did have someone once in a group who was a paramedic, and he said my breathing changed from 19 breaths a minute normally to 12. And at some point in this process, I feel like I'm not in charge of my body. If I think I want to lift my hand, I can't lift it. It just lays there. It's like I disconnect from operating my body.
This type of phenomenon is the specialty of anthropologist Felicitas Goodman, who in 1995 tested Catherine's vital signs while channeling Desi. Goodman noticed something unusual when she analyzed some of Catherine's body patterns while channeling.
Her blood pressure drops and pulse increases, which is totally unexpected because that means that you're dying.
Other scientists insist that these physiological changes are irrelevant because the mind has the power to control these bodily changes. They believe this evidence only shows the presence of strong belief, not some outside force.
The measuring of gurus and swamis and people that meditate, chant, channel, and so on, it does show that they actually have physiological changes in their body. I'm not a bit surprised at that. To get away with it, you can't fake it. You have to really believe that you're capable of doing this.
Catherine has no doubts about the validity of her experiences. She looks at her dual life with Desi as a blessing for both her and her clients.
This is a process that hopefully will result in people pursuing their own development and finding the answers from within, because that's really where the best answer for each person lies, is in themselves, not in Desi and not in anybody else that channels.
Next, this tiny Florida town is full of mediums and psychics who claim to be able to train anyone to contact the dead.
Yes, ma'am. What's your name? Okay, Marie, I feel there's a strong and good aspect here.
It looks like any other small town. There's a post office, a general store, even a bed and breakfast. But there's something different about Cassadaga, Florida, 35 miles northeast of Orlando. It's a town full of mediums, channelers, and spiritualist healers.
Somebody will invite you to a new area and go. It will be very interesting. You will gather more information, something of a new sort that you have not been in touch with before.
What's more, the locals claim that they can train anyone to become their own spiritual medium. Karen Moore is a former paralegal who stopped working in 1994 after injuring herself in a car accident. She is now a medium in training. Karen was introduced to this unusual world when she went to see a medium who was performing readings at a neighbor's house in Orlando. While there, she was told that she had the ability to become a medium.
The lady that was sitting on the other side said, "You should be on this side of the table. You could right now probably read me, as opposed to me giving you a message."
That visit inspired Karen to seek training to become a medium. Jerry Frederick is her instructor. He's a medium who has lived in Cassadaga for more than 20 years.
We think in the terms of ethics and then perceptions and kind of weave these together. Now, when I look at it from that point of view, it's kind of like fine-tuning a radio or a television set. What quality, what channels, what stations you're going to bring in.
Karen began her education by attending so-called meditation circles held throughout Cassadaga. The circles are 3 to 4 hour sessions held weekly where instructors teach students to meditate and to attune themselves to the spirit world around them. Karen says it took nearly 4 years of these sessions for her to be able to zero in on her ability to speak to the dead. Today, Karen continues her training. One of her development exercises is to work with some of Cassadaga's most experienced mediums doing an exercise called psychometry. Psychometry allows a medium to disseminate information from spirits on personal objects, such as a watch or a ring, which are placed in the medium's hand.
I got this, it looks like a piece of coal or something. When I first felt it, it felt very cold to me, and it still does feel cold. I'm not sure whose it is, but I feel that it's like a keepsake for them, that's something that is very important for them, that they carry around with almost like a good luck charm. And probably when they handle it, it is very, very warm to them. And it sounds a little different, but the coldness, I think, comes from family, of them not being around family because of them being so busy. Whose is this?
Mine.
Is it yours?
It's a ring.
Karen had gotten it right. It was, in fact, a good luck charm that belonged to the man sitting next to her. The coldness occurred because the piece of coal had once been carried into space on a NASA mission.
Sometimes I just know, and that's what you have to trust. When you just know, you have to trust your gut. And if you start questioning and you start saying, what does this mean? You'll lose it. What you have to do is, once you get it, you give it.
Another way for Karen to learn how to communicate with the dead is to preside over one of the town's weekly message services. The hour-long program is sponsored by Cassadaga's governing board and is designed to give anyone who wishes a forum to ask questions and receive advice from the spirit world.
I see dollar signs above your head, so it's going to bring some money to you. This will be in about January, but right now you need to kind of get your feet planted on the floor. I see things starting to settle out, and you get in. It's only going to take you about a week because you are, like I said, a very organized person. It's going to take you about a week, but after that week, you'll see that things will be a lot easier on you.
These message services are one of the final steps in Karen's training. She will soon become certified by Casadega's Supervisory Board of Mediums. This board only approves mediums and other psychics who have met standards of spiritual ethics set early in the town's 104-year history. She will then be allowed to give psychic readings in any of the town's facilities.
I want to be helpful because I love to help people. And if I can help somebody, then I feel I have done my job.
Does Karen Moore possess an innate psychic ability? Is it possible to be taught how to contact an alternate reality?
I believe that with training, anyone can become as psychic as the psychics. Being a psychic has nothing to do with any special psychic power, but it's just a performance. And anyone can learn techniques such that they can give readings even to total strangers that convince the strangers that you know all about them.
Another source of revenue for mediums and psychics is to teach your skill. Weekend seminars, trips, things like this. And of course, that's part of the whole shtick. They say, well, I'm not special, I'm just like everybody else with experience and practice with, you can do this too. Well, it's another way of making money, you say. And for me to teach you this, it's going to cost $300 or $3,000, whatever. There's money to be made, people to be fleeced.
Steve Adkins, the vice chairman of Casadega's town council, contends that skeptics use the money issue as a way to discourage people from even exploring the possibility of communication with the dead. He challenges those same skeptics to come to Casadega and see for themselves.
We will demonstrate what we believe. And if you do go to someone for a reading or something of that nature, be very closed-mouthed. Answer with yes or no questions. Don't tell them what they're supposed to be telling you. If they ask you questions, say yes or no. Make the person prove their talent and make them show beyond a reasonable doubt, prove what they're saying is true.
Whether true or not, both skeptics and believers alike acknowledge the human urge to get answers from beyond the grave.
It doesn't surprise me to see the popularity of this sort of thing because, as I say, hope springs eternal. In the human breast, the hope for a better tomorrow, a lure of all these different New Age beliefs is an instant road to that place.
Everybody has a connection to spirit. Everybody has guides. And everybody can choose or not to pursue that. And however it shows up for anybody, no one way is better than another.
When you see the overall picture, the scheme, then you see it for what it is. And the spirit is eternal. You can't hurt the soul. You can't hurt the spirit. The spirit can't die. So what a joy it is to realize there is no death and that your loved one will be there.
Someday, science may begin asking questions about the existence of life after death. Until then, the notion of speaking with spirits will continue to be a pathway to understanding for some, and for others, a journey that only leads to more questions.